America, bonjour, hi, Canada. Hugh Hewitt live inside the ReliefFactor.com studio. 50 years ago, the United States Congress passed the Budget and Impoundment Control Act of 1974. And it's been 50 years of dysfunction. Now comes Americans for Prosperity. They are a good sponsor of this program. Kurt Couchman is a senior fellow with them to talk about what ought to replace that terrible bill. Kurt, good Monday morning. Thanks for getting up early. Can we start with the process as it is before we talk about the proposal that you've got, which is Comprehensive Congressional Budget Act? What do we have right now? Because it clearly isn't working.
Absolutely. And apologize, my chihuahua seems to hear your voice and be disturbed by it, but I'm glad to be here with you. So the process that we have was set up in 1974. That same bill also created the budget committees in the House and the Senate and the Congressional Budget Office. The idea was to reclaim power that the presidents had stolen from Congress, LBJ and Nixon, and put it back in Congress where it belongs. All legislative powers granted in the Constitution are vested in Congress, or that's how it's supposed to be. So what they do is the budget committees produce a budget resolution that both chambers are supposed to approve, the same one, and that doesn't happen anymore. And then they tell each of the committees how much they're able to spend. The appropriators get going with that, but it's not a very healthy process. We're still trying to finalize.
It doesn't often happen, right? They never get to the actual budget. Like once every 5 years, they get a budget.
Well, they've never done a budget. They get a budget resolution done every now and then. That's just a framework. And the appropriations bills haven't all been passed on time since 1996 for FY 1997. So it just doesn't work well.
And so what is the Comprehensive Congressional Budget Act that you're proposing? What would it make Congress do differently from the dysfunction it currently is saddled with?
Well, it would build on the foundations that were laid by the current process, but fix it so that you get all the committees that are managing all the spending and the revenue committees all contributing to a budget that actually has everything in it. So the appropriators would still do what we call discretionary spending, but then the other 16 committees that have authority to spend would contribute their piece and manage their portfolios every year and get their members involved. And then, of course, the Senate Finance Committee and the House Ways and Means Committee would contribute not only their spending portfolios, but also all the revenue, all the tax bases and rates and all the tax preferences. So you can look and see where the money is coming from, where it's going, and you can actually manage the whole thing, coordinate programs, reduce deficits and debt, and just have Congress that works a lot better at serving the American people.
If anyone actually knew how the budget process worked, Kurt, they would be disgusted, but nobody pays much attention to it because it's boring, right? Nobody likes to do the budget except Paul Ryan. He wanted to be chairman of the budget committee, and my friend John Campbell wanted to be on the budget committee. And I looked at him and I said to John, why? Nobody cares, because the only time it matters is when they want to do reconciliation, which is a backdoor to get around 60 votes in the Senate. Does the proposed bill put forward by AFP change any of that?
So the bill has been proposed by Congressman Blake Moore, Republican from Utah, and a Democrat from Washington, Marie Gluesenkamp-Perez. We're strong supporters of it. We helped them develop it. What it would do is replace this dysfunctional reconciliation process with every committee managing their portfolios every year in this comprehensive budget. The problem with reconciliation is because it is an end around the 60-vote threshold in the Senate, both parties have used it to do things that only their members want to do. Almost inevitably, it's increased deficits and debt every single time.
Yeah, the only thing I like about reconciliation is if the Republicans have both houses and the president, they get one piece of legislation a year. Otherwise, they're blocked. And Democrats use reconciliation to spend all the money under Joe Biden twice. And now they're blocked because the House is there. So it's really just a workaround. It's not a budget deal. But if we had a budget, given that we don't have an amendment limiting spending and requiring a balanced budget, would it actually matter, Kurt?
Absolutely. And we should have a balanced budget amendment, and we should have statutory rules that implement a balanced budget amendment. And there's a bunch of other pieces that Congress should have. But this one piece, by making everyone accountable for the entire budget, would inherently reduce deficits, but also When the budget resolution comes out, it sets the top lines for each of those committees, and that creates guardrails. And it says if you try to spend more than you're allowed to spend, then the budget committee can send it back to you and say, "Hey, fix this." And if the committee that wants to spend too much never fixes it, then the budget committee can just stick in the current law line items into the comprehensive budget and say, well, you had your chance, but here's the baseline, so we're going to move forward without you. So it really creates a lot of incentive.
It's good on paper. But, Kurt, I live in the world of Congress, and that's what I cover. And unless you get Leader McConnell or Majority Leader Schumer, or you get Speaker Johnson or Hakeem Jeffries to be on your team, it's hard to imagine budget legislation passing. So what is the path forward here?
So part of it comes from the self-interest of leaders. So the current process puts a lot on the shoulders of leadership in ways that are inappropriate for a legislative body, where you've got 400 or 535 members representing all Americans, but then you've got a handful of people that are actually making the decisions and calling the shots. So this would empower the committees to drive forward the annual budget process, take some of the weight off of leaders' shoulders. So it is in their self-interest, but it's also in the country's interest. And there's kind of a low simmering revolt happening right now, especially among Republicans, because we are so dissatisfied with the outcomes that we're getting from Congress and bureaucrats running amok and all the rest of that, that there's real appetite for change right now. And so that's why we're enthusiastic. The bill's just been introduced a couple weeks ago. We've got a long road to go, but the conversations we've had with both sides of the aisle are really promising, but we need to have a lot more of those.
Do you have there's a class of congressmen known as an appropriator, and they're like a third branch of the Congress. They're Democrats, Republicans, and appropriators. Appropriators spend money. They've got the authority to spend money. What does your bill do to the Appropriations Committee?
Well, that's a good question. You can't actually get something passed in Congress unless the appropriators are at least okay with it. They do wield a lot of power, and so this would preserve their role in managing discretionary spending. But it would put it in a more holistic context. Look, the long-term fiscal challenge we face is not primarily appropriations, although there's waste there. What it comes from is growth in healthcare programs and pension programs, primarily Social Security. And so we have to be looking at everything, and then also create an incentive to weed out the nonsense that's in all parts of the budget, including appropriations. So you'd end up, for everyone, kind of getting other members getting a close look at other things. And because you'd be moving money from one priority to another one, you'd actually get real conversations about trade-offs. And that would apply to both appropriators and everyone else's jurisdiction.
People can go to americansforprosperity.org if they want to read it. But, James, again, I like to go to realism checks. Do you get people sitting down wanting to move this process forward, or is this a think tank game? Because I know Americans for Prosperity are actually kind of driven by results. How do you get this across midfield, much less across into the red zone and the goal line?
Absolutely. So I've worked at think tanks. I've worked on Capitol Hill. I worked for 2 members of the House Budget Committee, and I've been doing this advocacy. The thing that matters to me is getting results for the American people. So the guiding principle is find something that solves problems not only for the people, but also for members of Congress. This is something that the committees of jurisdiction are very interested in. They want to kick the tires on it, of course. But they see how this would empower them, the budget committees. It would empower the appropriators and take some of the pressure that is coming on them and redirect it into places where it's more productive. Freedom Caucus, moderates, Democrats, they all see the possibility, because right now they just don't matter very much as representatives for the people that they're sent to represent. And they want
I'm going to talk with former Congressman John Campbell when he comes on. Which budget committee members did you work for, by the way, James?
I worked for Justin Amash for 4 years, and then I worked for Dave Bratt for 2.
Okay, so very conservative guys. And I'm going to talk with Campbell's very conservative as well. I really don't think the budget committee matters whenever power is divided, does it?
It doesn't right now. If this legislation were adopted, it would matter a whole lot more. Every single year, setting the guardrails. That's the hope, that you get all the committees to work together harmoniously to find out where you can add value and where current policies not adding value, and then redirect those resources to deficit reduction or tax cuts or, the border or whatever else it might be.
Well, there's a big mountain to climb. You have to start with
Sure.
the first step, which you've got it drafted. It's called the Comprehensive Congressional Budget Act. If you want to read about it, go to americansforprosperity.org. Thank you.